what we are learning through this is that work, which is something so many of us, and I would say most people within the church, most people disconnect what they call their spiritual life and their secular life or their work life. We say, oh, these things are not connected, and that is not true whatsoever. Your entire life, every minute, every second of your day, everything that you do is a part of your spiritual life. In fact, all work, whether it's happening in a church, on behalf of a church, or it's working through you as a Jesus follower, all work is meant to be spiritual work. And God is affirming that, and I want to affirm that. I want to hold that up high because it's critically important that we as a church recognize that the greatest field of harvest, the greatest field of mission for each and every one of us is in the workplace. That is one of the biggest areas that we have. And God wants to use you there for whatever opportunities He can create. And so, as we're aspiring to be bright, I've been hearing a number of stories, and I think about one story here in our church, a gentleman by the name of Ron. Now, Ron worked most of his life acquiring land for In-N-Out Burger. Who likes In-N-Out Burger? Duh, everybody likes In-N-Out Burger. That's why the lines are so long. So anyway, that's what he did for most of his life. But then he decided he wanted to retire, so he decided he would start another business venture, and that would be to Bubba's Car Wash, which is just down, around the corner from us. He's got 2 other locations as well. And here's what I love about Ron. Ron is not afraid to use his opportunity as an employer to create opportunities for people who are starting over. People need another opportunity. They need to start over somewhere. And he has been able to connect a number of people who say, you know what? I need to start over. I need a new life. And I've determined in my life it's going to be different. And Ron's able to connect them with a job and get started. He's not afraid of that when it fits. And whatever they do with that opportunity is completely in their hands. And has Ron been burned a little bit? The answer is yes. But Ron is determined not to become cynical, but to continue to offer opportunities for people, because there's also been numbers of people who have taken that opportunity and done the right thing with it. This is what he can do in the workplace. Is this making sense to us, church? This is exactly what Jesus is talking about when he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, you are the light of the world. And then he says, let your good deeds, like giving somebody another chance, let them shine through for all to see. He doesn't want people to hide these things under a bowl, he says in the passage, but he wants people to see them because it shows the glory and the richness and the mercy and the redemptive story that Jesus is telling through our lives. And that's exactly what Jesus was talking about. You see, every time you go to work, you are shining. Something's shining through. And Jesus said, if you're my follower, then I'm meant to shine through you. Some of the greatest career advice you would ever have is to recognize that that which Jesus is calling out of you is the very thing that your employer, your supervisor, the owners of your organization are hoping are going to come through you as well. Now, if you're here today and you're saying, well, I'm retired, I'm not working, this doesn't have anything to do with me, it has a lot to do with you. Because there are people in your life that you have the ability to have these conversations with, and you know as well as I do, that for some of us, our sons and daughters are not doing well, and it's because of these things. To sit down with them as a mom, as a dad, or a grandparent, and pass these truths on will help them be successful in the marketplace, and especially if they are Jesus followers. It's important that we pay attention to the one place that we spend the majority of our life at, which is the workplace. So, we've been looking at the character sketch of Daniel. We started last week. We're going to finish up with him this week. There's so much in his story. We're going to basically go to chapter 6 today, but man, there's a lot between chapter 1 and chapter 6. I highly recommend over this holiday, take some time and just read through Daniel. Great, great book. There's way more here, and you're going to start connecting even more dots than what I'm doing through this passage. But what we learned last week is that Daniel, someone who did not want to be where he was, see, he was part of captive people. He was a part of the royal family in Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar, this is all historical fact, went and ransacked, besieged Jerusalem, took the nobles back to Babylon, and he put them in his court. Daniel was forced into a 3-year education, the finest education actually on the planet in that generation and in that era. He was put into this as a servant, absolutely a slave, really. And at some point, though, Daniel decided that he was not going to just be forced here, but he would choose to serve the king. He had a job description, he had supervisors. Sounds a lot like a career that would last 4 kings. He would last 4 kings in his lifetime. Here's the thread. The thread that's going through these messages is this. Daniel, and this is in your notes, Daniel set himself up to succeed. And because of that, he shined bright. You see, he was able to do that because he took control of what he could control. There wasn't much Daniel could control. I mean, let's just be honest. He was a slave. Okay? He served the king. You have very strict parameters about what your life is going to be, even the food that you eat, the time schedule that you keep, where you live. There was a lot about his life he couldn't control. But there were a few things he could control. Oddly enough, they're the same things you and I can control. The first thing that we looked at last week, I'm not going to teach these points. If you want to hear more about them, you can go back to last week, but it sets up our last point today that we wanted to talk about, which is this, is that Daniel accepted, he surrendered to his circumstances, which simply means this. He was able to say, this is not what I want, it's not where I want to be, this is not how I want to live. But I'm here, I can't do anything about that, I don't have any other options. And so I will recognize this as my starting point, and me and God are going to make this better. That's what we're going to do. I trust the sovereignty of God. I am where I'm at because God has brought me here, and I'm going to accept that. There is purpose in it all. And because he could control a few things, he was able to accept these circumstances. And then the second thing is that he chose to serve. He chose to serve. He wasn't just forced into it. There came a point when he chose to serve. I think about a friend of ours. His name is Paul, and he drives for Lyft and Uber. It's not a job that he wanted. It was a job that he took because it was the only thing available to him, and he needed to make a little money. And so he took this job. Lo and behold, he began discovering that God is bringing opportunities to him because of this, because people are driving around with him and they just start throwing up all over him, their hearts and their lives and all of the angst that's going on in their life. There are people saying, I've been asking God questions, and they're telling Paul these things as he's driving them around. But here's the thing, if Paul doesn't know why he's there and he hasn't chosen to serve God and people while he's driving around, all he's doing is eating gravel. I don't want to be doing this. I hate this job. Meanwhile, this person's in the back seat crying their eyes out. He's thinking, would you shut up? I'm trying to drive. You're distracting me. But because he knows why he's there, he recognizes this is an opportunity. God's brought this to me. And because of that, Paul, since the beginning of this year in January, has already led between 50 and 60 people to Christ in his car. Guys, don't tell me we don't have opportunities. We do. But the problem is that too many of us are not looking for those. And God absolutely wants to use us if we will shine bright, if we will aspire to it. Because all work has spiritual value if we will do it in the name of Christ.